breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James. So let's get started with a question. Can we fix talent attraction and burnout with PTO or paid time off?
No. And we're done. But seriously, no. With the way that we currently talk about paid time off, or the way that we currently implement, especially things like unlimited PTO policies, which are becoming a lot more common. There seems to be a lot of chatter about them, especially post-COVID, as the war for talent is kind of brutal in a lot of industries. No, we get it wrong. So we need to really look at what the intent of these programs are, and kind of the thesis statement of all of our podcasts are: these things can work if you have the right company culture. So those are the things that I want to talk about today. Is what is the type of culture that needs to exist to make these things work, to address burnout and talent attraction and retention, and what is the intent that we're actually when we're trying to implement these types of policies? What is our intent? So I kind of want to start with that intent piece, because I think that's important to discuss right off the bat. And there are some absolute benefits to unlimited or to paid time off policies, or robust paid time off policies, or even unlimited PTO. We when we're looking at implementing these types of solutions, we're looking at them as this is a huge incentive or big perk that our employees get to take advantage of, that sets us apart from the competition. So from a talent attraction standpoint, it's a very, very persuasive perk, because it sounds amazing. Mm-hmm. I get an unlimited amount of paid time off. All I need to do is make sure that the work is getting done, and then I can take as much time as I need. That's a very attractive offer, if you don't dig too deep into how it actually plays out in the workplace. There's, if you can Google search and find all kinds of articles that are written about having sufficient time off can lead to people providing increased productivity. That you don't really have to worry about unused or accrued vacation days, because that's kind of wrapped up in that PTO. It's a really attractive perk that will draw more people to your business, and employees gain freedom, and it builds mutual trust. Well, that's all well and good until you actually start examining how companies are using PTO policies.
Yeah, right? I mean, that's a really nice sales pitch. That's the nice brand. That's the topical, catch our competitive edge, as you said. But I think, but what you're really kind of really saying is that, like we talked about in one of our previous podcasts about hybrid work and work from home, it's a tool. Yeah. And PTO is a tool, and it can be a very powerful tool, but a tool is only as good as how it's used. And when we, promote that we have this tool, but we don't really use it properly, then we're really not meeting its full potential, or we're not giving the people that are drawn to us because of PTO or because of work from home, we're not giving them what they expect, which ultimately sets up them to fail and sets up ourselves to fail.
It does. And this is at the crux of why I said, no, it's not going to fix your problem. Because it's just the tool is used poorly. Mm-hmm. And it's a shame, because unlimited PTO or the philosophy behind unlimited PTO really can make a huge difference. Now, it's very contextual to the type of work, right? These types of solutions really only work in specific types of environments, right? You're not going to be able to provide an unlimited PTO benefit in like a retail environment or in a food service or a production.
This is for desk workers, really. Like both kind of work from home and PTO are primarily around what we call like desk workers and non-desk
knowledge work. Is kind of the one of the buzzwordy terms. I mean, it works in a certain type of environment. And it only works if you really have a focus on as a results oriented workplace. That the result that you're measuring people's results, not their time. And we've talked many times about the difference between being busy and being productive. And it really, this is one of those rules that really helps to empower productivity.
And I mean because you're right. There are some work environments like say retail where you have people on the floor or production work or stuff where you need to be responsive and the time that they're in a certain place is really, really important. So those time-based jobs, having people that can come and go as they please and may not be there is not necessarily the best tool for that environment. But I think what's also important is that when we have the time-based work that's operationally time-based, but then we also kind of have this middle, then we have task-based work that's more of that knowledge work that as long as you achieve X by Y date, then you're good. There's some of that, but then there's this kind of middle ground where you have really that task-based work, but the expectations from the workplace and management is that it needs to be done during a certain time. Something like you're putting time-based restrictions on task-based work. And that's probably where a lot of this misuse of the tool of PTO kind of lives. Because
I want to jump on that because where I've seen the misuse is, yes, it's in those environments, but I want to be more specific than that. Because the where you go wrong with unlimited PTO is by putting restrictions on it. Right. As soon as there will be operational requirements, there will be managerial approval, there will be certain things that have to go into any policy. But it's no secret that I spend more time than I should on Reddit.
That's true.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great time suck. I'll call it research for our podcast. Then I can justify my time.
Okay, all right.
We'll just go with it. But this is something that I've seen come up very frequently, actually, especially over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Almost daily, I've been seeing questions about, as a manager, how do I deal with unlimited PTO? I've got this unlimited PTO request. How do I deal with this? There was one just a couple days ago that kind of stood out to me because, they were asking how should they respond to a unlimited PTO request for 3 weeks off, right? And they kind of laid out some of the key points in their policy. And the problem is their policy said that, had to be there had to be managerial approval. Fine. But their unlimited paid time off policy said that you can't take an excessive amount of time off.
Right.
So what's excessive in unlimited?
Yeah.
Right. So I understand the intent behind why that would go in there. And it makes sense, right? Yeah. You do not want people to take advantage of
course. Right.
You don't want people to misuse the policy. right? We want people to take advantage of the
Yes.
advantages that we give them, right?
Right.
We don't want people to misuse or abuse the policies. So we put these restrictions in place with the best of intentions. But the problem becomes you have been promising people in your policy that they have an unlimited amount of paid time off.
Right.
So your policy, your practice needs to match your policy.
Otherwise you're given a kind of a bait and switch, right?
You are giving a bait and switch, which does not help your recruitment efforts, which does not help your retention efforts, which does not help your burnout mitigation, which does not accomplish all of the things that you want to accomplish by instituting these types of policies.
Yeah, it's kind of like, if I had to compare it to something, it's almost like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet. And then, which is big, which is, a big sign on the window. And then when you kind of get inside, there's a little sign by the table that says you're limited to 2 plates an hour. It's not during lunchtime or dinner time. The offer is only valued or only there between, say, 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. every other Sunday or something. And you're like, well, that's not all you can eat. Like, I walked in here because of what I was offered. And then when I get there, this unlimited all you can eat is just a matter of it's just a very restricted thing. It's not what it promised, bait and switch, right?
Yeah. And that is, you lose trust and credibility with your employees very, very quickly. When even with the best of intentions, and I do believe that these policies are implemented with the absolute best of intentions, that we want to provide people what they need. We want to provide them with the flexibility that they need, with the time off that they need, so that they can rest and recharge, and that they can give their best to us. We will give our best to them. That I truly believe that is the intent 99% of the time.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and I just want to continue the best comment that I saw on that Reddit post really spoke to what I think is the most important. I agree with it entirely, and it's kind of where my mind goes with these types of policies. And that's the only question you should really be asking with a paid time off policy or a paid time unlimited PTO request is, do you have a plan for the work, for how the work is going to be covered while you're away?
Right.
Yes or no? If the answer is yes, the time off is approved. If the answer is no, then the time off is not approved until they have that plan in place. Now, if that doesn't happen, if work gets dropped, then you have a performance issue. You enter into your regular disciplinary procedures or performance management procedures, right? It is, if you have an unlimited paid time off policy, you really, and I think this is the heart of it, is that when we talk about unlimited paid time off, we actually focus on the time off, which is the wrong place to put our focus. Rather than putting our focus on the results, the work, as long as the work is being done, I don't care how much time you take off, because we need the results of your efforts.
Okay, so I guess you can kind of say almost like one of the fundamental problems with how we try to implement and use PTO is we're kind of thinking of it like almost backwards. We're focusing on restricting or putting a box around about how people use their time off, and then assuming that when they're not off, they're being productive. But maybe what you're kind of saying is that we should be focusing on putting the box around how to be the most productive, and then anything beyond that is kind of their time to do with as they feel is right. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. It's like the way that we operate with our company is that there's work that needs to be done. We are very focused on, that we have a number of projects that are ongoing. We have, different levels of responsibility. We've got, different things that need to be done. But ultimately, as long as the work's being done, I don't care if you need to take a day off to go to that's neither here nor there. It could be a day to go shopping. I don't care. The work needs to be done.
Mhm.
And as long as the work is being done, or you have a plan to make sure that clients are not being dropped,
Right.
because, well, I mean, in our business, client relationship, client management is essential. It's
Mhm.
as it is in every business.
Yeah.
We need to make sure there are certain things that to keep our business running and to keep people employed, we need to have clients who are happy and willing to pay us. We have to have projects that are moving forward. We have to
Timelines that are being met.
our obligations to our clients, to our partners, to all of these things. So we put measurements in place. We
Right.
put structure in place, and we use tools that allow us to collaborate effectively.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we don't measure people's time. I
No.
don't measure your time. You don't measure mine. We don't measure the time
Everyone I
that
work with. Yeah.
right.
Yep.
As
Yep.
long as work is being done, I don't care if you do it at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night. I don't care if if the deadline is next Friday,
Mhm.
then I'll check in with you to make sure that we're on track or that we have a plan for how that work is going to get done.
Mhm.
But the work is, as long as the work is done on time, and is to the quality standards that we set, the rest of the time is yours. You
Yeah.
are a professional. We have hired you to as a professional to do certain work. And I think this is how, if I could wave a magic wand and say this is how companies need to use unlimited PTO, it would
Mhm.
be, you've hired professionals who are highly skilled and have a professional mindset. Set the measurements
Mhm.
of what needs to be accomplished, create the boundaries around what they can't do, and then give them the freedom to do everything else.
Right. And I think this is a great time for us to bring up something that we talk about a lot in our training programs and in some of our coaching and consulting work, is kind of like a big part of this is we talk about maybe they're thinking about PTO backwards, is that sometimes, and what you're talking about is kind of the philosophy of how to create rules and structure in your workplace. And so then we talk about in like our autonomy freeway program and things like that, is things around the difference between rules that restrict and rules that empower.
Right.
So rules that restrict tell you what you can do. It limits, which sounds like a supportive thing, but it's actually about limiting the options that you have, and it puts restrictions on your actions and your judgments. You can only do these things. Success can only happen if it looks like this. And whereas rules that empower tell you what you can't do, kind of like what you just said, it eliminates certain options. Like I said, you can't, let clients drop and you can't miss deadlines. But as long as you do all the things that, like as long as you're not doing the things you can't do, everything else is on the table. Use your professional judgment, do what you be you, make it happen. And the idea of, I think that if we had to really kind of put a summary on what is the point and the best use of PTO, it's to say that if you're using PTO as a rule that restricts, and you're putting the focus on limiting how people use their time off, then again, it's a rule that restricts, and you're limiting what they can do. But if you focus on rules that empower, and PTO is kind of the side effect of what happens when someone is focused on the results and getting the work done, then you're creating those rules that empower. And that's probably the fundamental philosophy that people really need to shift their mind to if they really want to get the best use out of a tool like unlimited PTO.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to follow up on the rules that empower, because we actually use rules that empower most frequently the higher up in the food chain you go in an organization.
Right.
Organizational governance usually is framed from executive limitations. It's a very common, very well used framework for how an organization governs, especially if they have a board of directors. The board will set out the executive limitations that says the CEO can do, as long as the CEO does not do this, and this, they have the freedom to use their professional judgment. All we're saying is that the highly successful, very effective model of providing rules that empower to your CEO can be applied throughout your organization. We lose things in as we like we use this very effectively in one respect, and then as we I hate the illustration that I'm using right now, because as we go down the ladder, or as we go down the authority levels, we become more and more restrictive, saying that it's not, it's not, here's the box and you can do anything you want as long as you're not going outside of that framework. We start pinpointing very specifically, saying this is what you're allowed to do, this is not what you're allowed to do, or this is the only way to be successful. And I think we need to provide some examples of rules that restrict, because talking about it in an abstract sense, I don't know would be as effective as an actual example.
Well, I mean, but like going back to like to the whole idea of PTO, it's like, you can have PTO or you have unlimited paid time off, but it can't be, but can't be any more than this. And it can't be during, when everyone else during peak vacation period, and it can't be during this, can't be during that. That's putting the restrictions that say, this is, the only way you can use PTO is like this. That is a rule that restricts. Whereas, as we said before, a rule that empower is, okay, so as long as you're putting the box around, as long as clients are not being dropped, deadlines are being met, budgets are being maintained, then when and where you work and how often you work is up to you. That's a rule that empowers. So I mean, like was one good example.
It is. And I want to be clear that not all rules that restrict are bad. Oftentimes our safety policies will be intentionally designed to restrict, because we need to restrict what people do.
Yeah.
So equipment use is typically framed from this is the only way that this is how you are successfully using the equipment use policy. Right. Safety procedures are very frequently restrictive,
necessarily,
for very good reason. So I want to be clear that rules that restrict have a very defined purpose in place. But we tend to default to the restrictions and defining what success looks like, rather than defining what the
parameters,
behaviors that we don't want, and allowing people the freedom so long as they are not violating those restrictions.
Yeah. And so I think we should kind of get back to as we talked about the question we asked at the beginning about talent attraction and burnout, how PTO can affect that. Because I think that now that we've kind of clarified the idea of the intent and the rules that restrict versus the rules that empower, I think that when it comes to, let's say burnout first, I really do think that when you have the culture that supports rules that empower, you can have a major reduction in the way that in burnout, because you can provide people more flexibility, more freedom, more opportunity to kind of use their judgment, build their own schedule. But PTO cannot fix burnout if you're in a culture that leans into the rules that restrict, because then you're actually putting more layers of pressure of the expectation that they have to you only use it in a certain way, and you're kind of layering on the pressure and the restrictions and limitations on people, which can actually increase burnout, especially if they came there going, I can only do this job, or this job's going to be really really effective for me if I have this limited PTO. Then I realize I actually don't have it. It's just called that, but it really isn't that. Then almost like you've almost amplified burnout.
Well, yeah, and I think it can. So jumping on that, it can really make matters worse. Providing a bad PTO policy or unlimited PTO policy can cause far more harm. And one of the common concerns or complaints that I hear is how it's almost implemented, the perception at least is that it's implemented as a way of saying, well, we provide you with an unlimited amount of PTO, paid time off, so we're gonna keep dumping more and more work on you because you can just take the time off to recharge as you see fit.
Right.
It's kind of almost thought of
It's your
as,
fault if you burn out.
well, yeah, I mean, but if your company culture does not allow people to actually take the time off, and this is the complaint that I hear, is that the culture, you have a paid time off policy, but the workplace, the organization dumps so much on your plate that you are almost, you have the time, you have the ability to take the time, but you're not encouraged to take the time, right? That it's almost seen as it's almost seen in a negative light to take advantage of a policy that you have full right to access. Right. So it's this really weird dynamic between what companies say their values are and what companies reinforce that their values are.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, that's kind of like saying we provide free lunch in our cafeteria to every employee every day, but then you go to the cafeteria and the door is always locked, and then there's almost like, like people look down on you if you try and access the free lunch.
Yeah.
Like, but like you say, we have this, we have this, we have this, and then if you're hungry, that's on you. We have this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of it's kind of like we want the benefit of being able to say we have it without the actual responsibility of actually providing it.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many traps that we fall into with these types of programs. And
I don't, like you said before, I don't think it's intentional. I don't think that we're trying to do the bait and switch. I think it's almost like we implement, or companies implement these kinds of things, and they don't see the full picture, or they're using the wrong mindset when they plan it out. So they have to almost making almost like rules that kind of happen after the fact, almost like the reactive rules to try and like scale it back because it didn't work how they planned it, because honestly they didn't plan it out properly, or they had the wrong mindset going in.
That's the problem, is that it's not intentional. That's the problem. Like they don't intentionally screw over their employees by offering this and then yanking it out from under them. They don't put the intention behind the policy in the first place. They define what they actually mean and how they actually want it to use. They hear, like, there's so many gurus and experts who will say, implement paid time off, unlimited PTO will solve your problems, and here's all the benefits that well, no, it's not going to solve your problems if you just implement a policy without thinking it through. It's not going to solve your problems if you implement a policy in a work culture that doesn't allow for it to actually operate properly. Right? Like, if you are, like, just be honest about what your intentions are. And that's the best advice that I can give, is to actually define, what do you want to accomplish with this? And how is this going to play out in reality?
And what is almost the fundamental philosophy behind how you design your policies and rules? Are they to restrict and tell people what they can do, or are they to empower and putting a box around people what people can't do? And I think that's a great, like, if you take one thing away from this talk, I think that perspective of, are we telling people what they can do, or are we telling people what they can't do, is kind of a good thing to kind of have a bit of a reflection on how you operate, whether those rules are official policies or the unspoken expectations. That can actually be very telling about a lot of the ways that you use tools like unlimited PTO and work from home and all those other kind of things. Let's also talk about about how talent attraction, how PTO can't really fix a talent attraction.
Well, again, it comes down to how it's being used, right? If your best, the absolute best thing you can do for your talent attraction efforts is to remove job dissatisfaction. bar none, the
Mhm.
best thing that you can do to fix talent attraction is to remove job dissatisfaction. Because when your employees are happy, when they are satisfied in their jobs, when they are content, when they are productive, when they feel like they are actually valued and a part of the team,
Mhm.
they can become ambassadors for your organization. And there's a Kobe, you've written articles and talked at conferences about the ambassador effect many times.
Yeah, I think we'll do a podcast coming up in the near future about that too, because that's a great topic. You're right.
Yeah. Like I don't want to, yeah, we'll save a lot of it for that podcast, but very briefly, when we're talking about talent attraction, your recruitment efforts, we need to actually apply some of the psychology of marketing around what's your push and your pull.
Mhm.
Your push is in recruitment is the traditional way that we think about recruitment. It's your job postings, it's a recruiter contacting people, it's the outward messaging, the way that you push the information on people. And that is effective to a point. But what's more effective than that, and it's more of a long-term strategy, because you need to have the right culture in place that pulls talent to you, right? And that's only going to happen if you have people who are willing to say, yeah, these guys don't suck.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that because like the idea of, like, to me, there's a bit of a humorous perspective when you talk about um using a limited PTO as kind of part of your talent attraction piece to draw people to you. It's almost like we're such a great company that our one of our best qualities is when you don't have to be here. Like, you know what I mean? Where as like so I was like, yes, a job that I don't have to go to as often is almost like that's what's drawing me there. That's kind of a weird thing to think about it, kind of a weird draw. But the idea though is, I think that when it comes to talent attraction, having the perks and benefits are important, but if it's more about, again, we're the results focused, we're about empowering you to do the best job you can, and then what you do, after once you've met all your obligations and managed all your work and meet all your timelines, that's up to you. And I think that, that type of culture speaks better, is actually more transparent and more authentic than just we have a great unlimited PTO policy, and one of the best reasons to work here is when you don't have to be here. And so I do think that, that again, PTO sounds nice, but as you kind of said at the very beginning, it's not necessarily what it's a nice branding, it's a nice sales pitch, but when you dig into it, there's actually, it's actually might not be what you're looking for.
It only will work if you allow people to take the time,
Yeah.
if you don't pile so much work on people that they feel guilty or feel like they can't take the time,
Mm-hmm.
or if you penalize people, if you penalize people for taking advantage of a policy that you have written, you're screwed. You're like that.
You're doing it wrong.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't do it. Just
Yeah.
don't do it. Makes me so mad.
So yeah, and I think kind of one of the final things to kind of maybe leave people with is the idea of, if what you really want is to improve the results of the work that you do, is to meet your results and provide the best work, then make achieving those results, achieving the work, the focus of your policies and your philosophies and how you attract people to you. But if you want to sound like you're progressive and you want to actually, make it seem like you're offering great benefits, then but you're really about kind of putting limits on those benefits, then maybe then that's what happens when your focus is on the leaves.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of, where do you want, what's important to you, and then messaging that accordingly in both how to your employees around ensuring that you can reduce burnout, and to potential future employees, and how you attract talent.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
All right, so let's just tie all this up. So one of the things that is really important with unlimited PTO and paid time off is that it really is a tool that can only be effectively used in a culture that embraces its full intent. That it really is kind of a double-edged sword depending on how you're designing and using your policies. That if you put a lot of restrictions on your limited PTO, is kind of like going to a buffet where you limit the number of food plates you can eat, when you can eat it, and and it's only available sometimes. Really, a lot of the stuff needs to be framed from a perspective of rules that were strict and that create what they tell people what they can do and limits their options within those things that they can do, and rules that empower tells you what you cannot do, but then provides freedom to everything else that's not on that cannot do list. Rules that empower are actually going to be the results that you're looking for, and that will actually give you the opportunity to improve productivity in how you work, because the work is what's important and the time off is just kind of the side effect. If you want, PTO cannot really improve burnout in a culture that promotes their time off but doesn't really empower people to use it. And PTO is not the silver bullet for improving talent attraction if it's not done again in the culture that empowers people to get their best work done. So I think that pretty much summarizes.
There's just two things that I want to add. If you are using PTO or unlimited PTO policy, then the only question that you really need to be asking is there a plan for how the work is going to not get dropped during the time off? And if you're using unlimited PTO, you need to focus on the results of the workplace, not on the time. If you focus on time, you're going to fall into the trap and not gain any of the advantages that we've talked about.
Okay, so that about does it for us. So for a full archive of our podcast and access to the video version hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.